transforming wholeness taking place here. Mary is living with the social invisibility in the fragility of a young woman in first century Nazareth. Her whole future depends on a male relative. She finds herself pregnant with that presumed male relative, not knowing one thing about it at first. And the stigma and the shame, the risk of being accused of adultery, which, by the way, I'm sure you will know, carries the penalty of death by stone. That's pretty serious. So she leaves town. There are still, friends, many young women today whose lives teeter on the same edge of shame and vulnerability. I think of my good friend Sonia, not her real name, but I actually saw her this week and told her I was telling her story today, and she was like, thank you. 30 years ago, she owes her life, as she would say, to a Methodist women's home in South Dublin. Pregnant before or outside of marriage 30 years ago, she didn't have anywhere else to go. And so she will speak openly about a Methodist women's home in South Dublin that she does not know she would be here without them. The Irish Times has an article about another young woman in the same position who, talking about the same place, talks about turning up there and says, they didn't ask me to explain myself. They simply said, we're glad you're here. It saved my life, that quoted woman says in the Irish Times. Friends, God noticing the unnoticed, embodied through human welcome, much like Elizabeth opening her arms to her cousin and embracing her in welcome and saying, blessed are you amongst women. Mary's healing begins in being seen, in being noticed, in being held by God and by God's people, by Elizabeth, her extended family. So Mary's song, Mary's canticle, Mary's singing tells us first, God sees the overlooked. God sees those who feel shame, those who maybe feel exhausted, maybe those who feel they are unworthy. God's gaze itself is healing. Maybe that's all you actually need to hear today. Maybe you can have your 10-minute dose now while we go through the rest. Maybe there's someone here and that's it. You are seen. It's not new, by the way. In biblical history, if you go to the end of the 2nd chapter of Exodus, whenever the story of Moses is ramping up, there's a little verse, it often gets overlooked just at the end of Exodus chapter 2. It says, God heard their groaning, God remembered his covenant, and God looked upon them with concern. 3 verbs. God hears, God remembers, and God sees. That's a pattern of holy attention that comes before divine action. And here it is in the New Testament as well. God hears and sees and remembers. In this chapter in Luke, he sees another marginalized, perhaps unnoticed, perhaps in trouble teenager. And the first words of her praise are, you saw me. And she sings. What she sings, the wonderful theologian N.T. Wright calls the great reversal. You probably have heard this, but you know, I was trained in Strad-Millis, as Robin said, so this is what we call educational reinforcement. The great reversal. Did you hear it as Pamela read it for us? The proud, scattered. The mighty, toppled. The humble, lifted. The hungry, the rich, emptied. This, friends, is the great reversal. Not for chaos, but for the kingdom. This is healing on a cosmic, global scale. This is the great reversal, and it's not abstract spirituality. This is real, lived, dangerous justice. Because these are the sorts of words that get people and could get Mary in trouble. I think of a Mary Merritt, one of the survivors of the Magdalene laundries down south. And for decades, she lived ashamed, hidden, and unnamed, holding in her life experiences of abuse. But she describes, again in the Irish Times, the first time she told her story to a priest, and the priest simply said, "Mary, God sees you. You are worth joy." She said it was like someone opened a window into her soul. The proud systems that crushed her were exposed, the humble lifted, and her voice returned. A magnificat moment. The healing of individuals in Luke's Gospel, friends, are signposts to this great kingdom coming, this great reversal, as we've called it. Cosmic life turned upside down because God is with us. Emmanuel. We will sing it more than any other time of the year during these next number of days. Emmanuel, God is with us. Advent healing is with us. The healings that Mary proclaims are social, economic, political, scattering the proud, lifting the humble, filling the hungry, sending the rich empty away. This is systemic healing. And we still see glimpses of this breaking in across the world. There's quite a famous story you may have heard it. Dec25 talks about it in his 1999 book, No Future Without Forgiveness. He writes about the Sunday after apartheid in Johannesburg. The Sunday after apartheid had officially ended, and a white police officer whose job it was at one point to enforce apartheid laws comes forward to receive communion a rail like this, and beside him knelt a black South African woman who had previously been beaten by the officers from the same precinct where this officer served. And Dec25 recalls that the priest leading the communion stopped and was unsure what to do. And then the woman extended her hand to the officer and said, "Peace of Christ." The officer broke down in tears. Friends, the old order, pride, dominance, racial hierarchy, it collapsed in that moment. A magnificat in real time. The mighty humbled, the lowly lifted. Costly, dangerous, but embodied reconciliation. The world turned upside down by grace. Friends, let's note, this kingdom is a kingdom of concrete actions on the ground. Healing is not just personal, and we will pray this afternoon for personal healing. It is not just personal in this particular passage. It is cosmic transformation also. And so in both these fields, cosmic and personal, healing is embodied and is particular, because cosmic hope comes through a teenage girl's womb. God turns the world upside down through blood, breath, sweat, labour pains, fear, the vulnerability of frail human flesh. The ultimate healing act, friends, the incarnation, God becoming flesh to heal human flesh. Every individual healed by Jesus is a preview of the new creation. There's 13 of them in Luke, and it's been happening ever since Luke wrote his story. And where Mary's song is sung, there is pushback. Why? Because you know this. Systems resist being overturned. People, and particularly systems and hierarchies, do not like challenge. Then, when Mary sang, as well as now, the richest cling to the power, the poor struggle for voice. When Mary sang her song, Herod responded with brutal violence. When Jesus preached, the religious and the political powers plotted to have him taken out. But no power shall overcome, because God has heard and remembered and seen. And God has acted, and God acts still, and Mary's voice still sings. In the 1970s, there was a young unmarried mother in Belfast. She arrived at the Royal Maternity, terrified, hiding a pregnancy from her family that she had not confided in. A midwife whose diaries were later used for research by Queen's University, which is how we know the story. A midwife simply said, "You're safe now, love. You've done nothing wrong. Let's get you through this." The woman later wrote, "That midwife saved more than my life. She told me I was worth saving." An Elizabeth-like embrace, a Magnificat-like reversal, healing as dignity restored. Friends, the birth of the Christ child is for the healing of the nations. And today, it might be for the healing of you. It is completed in human blood and tears and commotion and anxiety and love, and it changes the cosmos. So whatever needs you have today, as somebody here to pray for others, or to be prayed for, or somebody to be prayed for who's here to pray for others, we pray for each other. We pray for the healing of the nations. We pray for the healing of our nations, whether it's individual pain, trauma, needs, social healing, for peace and dignity of all. Let us now begin to bring all that we can and all that we need to the God who still is amongst us.